Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a historical connection that might seem a bit unexpected at first. Ireland and Jamaica. We've gathered some really fascinating stuff, articles, analyses, even a documentary to unpack this.
Yeah.
Our goal really is to sift through it all and pull out those key insights, those moments that make you go, for you, the listener.
It definitely is a pairing that makes you pause, doesn't it? Ireland, Jamaica. You think, what's the real link there?
Exactly.
But when you start digging into the sources, this powerful story emerges. Shared experiences, cultural links you wouldn't expect, all kind of forged under the British Empire.
Right. So, okay, let's start at the beginning. The 17th century seems crucial. Our sources point to this really tough time in Ireland, especially after Cromwell's conquest, English campaigns in the mid-1600s.
Devastating, yeah.
And key for us. This led to thousands of Irish Catholics being forcibly deported. Men, women, kids, sent to the Caribbean, Jamaica included.
It's a huge number.
It really is staggering. Were the sources clear on, why the Irish specifically? I mean, others were oppressed by the English too, right?
That's a really good question. Beyond just the English regime seeing Irish Catholics as politically, undesirable, there were definite economic and strategic reasons, too. The English needed labor for the colonies, especially Jamaica after they took it from Spain. Sugar was booming.
Well, sugar plantations.
Exactly. It needed a massive workforce. And while, yes, African chattel slavery became the main horrific system,
Right.
deporting the Irish was an initial and, from their viewpoint, easy source of labor. People they considered a problem at home could be used for profit overseas.
Grim logic. Political control meets economic drive.
Pretty much, yeah. A grim calculation.
So they arrive in Jamaica, and they're put into indentured servitude. Now, it's really, really important we make the distinction here, like the sources do.
Crucial.
Between this and the chattel slavery Africans endured. But the research also shows this Irish servitude was often incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
Exploitative.
Oh, definitely.
One article mentioned how the terms could be extended for, tiny infractions or debts. So people could end up stuck in servitude for life, basically.
That's right. Despite the legal difference, the reality could be lifelong bondage for many.
Which led to this significant Irish presence, working those plantations. What was that early community like?
Well, through the 1600s and early 1700s, the Irish were actually one of the biggest European groups there.
Wow, really?
Yeah. They worked the sugar fields, often right alongside enslaved Africans. Terrible conditions for everyone involved, though different statuses, obviously.
Right.
But what's interesting is how it evolved. Some Irish did finish their indenture, got free, maybe got some land, became part of the island's fabric.
Okay.
Others, though, maybe through choice, maybe circumstance, ended up intermarrying or just living close to African communities.
So despite the whole colonial power structure, there are these points of contact, little openings for, cultural exchange.
Subtle ones, yeah, but significant over time.
That cultural mixing aspect really stood out to me, too.
Yeah.
It seems almost counterintuitive, given how oppressive everything was.
It does, yeah.
We know about the Maroons in Jamaica, obviously. These incredible communities of escaped Africans fighting for freedom.
Brave resistance, absolutely.
The sources say the Irish weren't typically, joining the Maroons.
No, generally not in that way.
But how did that cultural exchange actually happen then? Was it just proximity, that shared experience of being oppressed by the same empire, even if in totally different ways?
That's a sharp way to put it. It wasn't formal alliances, but more about those informal interactions.
Right.
The documentary probably touches on some personal stories there, but you see hints, maybe in language. Some suggest Gaelic traditions, like lamenting, might have subtly echoed in the rhythms of early Jamaican work songs.
Like an unconscious influence.
Kind of a resonance, maybe. Born from shared hardship, perhaps similar ways of expressing sorrow or resilience. Music, too, that travels easily.
Yeah, music crosses boundaries.
For sure. And then you have these communities, even today, in remote parts of Jamaica. Irish surnames among Black Jamaicans. Stories passed down about ancestors with lighter skin, Irish ties. It all points to this long, often unwritten interaction.
But things change as we get into the 1800s, 1900s, don't they?
Right. The paths diverge more.
The Irish population in Jamaica shrinks by the 19th century. The African-descended population becomes the clear majority. Meanwhile, back in Ireland, the fight for independence ramps up. They achieve it, mostly in 1921.
Yeah.
But Jamaica stays a British colony until 62. So you got these parallel fights against the same empire.
But on totally different tracks and timelines.
And with different outcomes demographically, yet
Yeah.
more recently, it feels like people are looking back at these connections again.
There's definitely a rediscovery happening, yeah.
What's driving that, do you think?
A lot of it seems to be a growing awareness of that shared colonial trauma.
Hmm.
Both places carry these really complex legacies of British rule. Different, profoundly different, but still connected by that experience.
Okay, that makes sense.
And also emigration. The diaspora experience, Irish and Jamaican communities ending up in the UK, the US, Canada.
New meeting points.
Exactly. In those diaspora spaces, maybe people are more open to exploring these tangled histories.
And you can see parallels in the liberation struggles themselves, can't you?
Absolutely.
That Irish drive for independence. You feel echoes of that same spirit in Jamaican resistance, even maybe in movements like Rastafari, that focus on freedom, identity, rejecting oppression.
Definitely. That yearning for self-determination, finding different cultural expressions.
And the sources point out connections still visible today.
Yeah, tangible links like the surnames, Burke, O'Hara, McCarthy still found in Jamaica.
Yeah.
A direct line back to those early settlers.
Right. And the music.
The music, yeah. That spirit of resistance, themes of identity, struggle.
Yeah.
You hear it in reggae, you hear it in traditional Irish music. It suggests something deeper culturally, doesn't it?
It really does. More than just coincidence.
Mm-hmm. And beyond music, that emphasis on storytelling, oral tradition, a strong sense of community. Seems like a common thread, too.
Resilient cultures, finding ways to connect and remember.
Exactly.
Which brings us to places like Sligoville, the first free village in Jamaica, founded by an Irish governor, the Marquess of Sligo. That feels huge.
It is symbolically massive, yeah. Sligoville, 1835, an Irish governor playing a key role in early emancipation.
It really highlights the complexity.
It does, a tangible link between sort of Irish influence and the anti-slavery fight there. And then you've got Irish Town, the place name itself, sticking around.
Grounding the history in actual locations.
Makes it feel more real, doesn't it?
Definitely. But we have to be careful here. The sources, especially that UC San Diego thesis, really stress the need for nuance.
Absolutely critical.
We must acknowledge the massive difference between Irish indentured servitude and African chattel slavery. The horror, the brutality, the lasting legacy. They're not the same.
Not at all. The thesis warns against that slaves to a myth idea. Simplistic comparisons are misleading and harmful.
So how do we talk about both? How do we see the shared context without downplaying the unique, horrific nature of chattel slavery?
That's the core challenge, isn't it? You acknowledge both groups suffered under British oppression, but the nature and consequences were fundamentally different.
Right.
But what this history does show is how colonialism tangled people up together, forced them into these shared systems of exploitation.
Okay.
And even within those systems, with all the power imbalances, you find these unexpected moments: survival, adaptation, cultural exchange, resilience. It's about seeing the connections without equating the experiences.
Okay. So wrapping up this deep dive then.
Yeah.
We've uncovered this significant but often overlooked history linking Ireland and Jamaica, rooted in colonialism, forced migration, those interactions between Irish arrivals and enslaved Africans, cultural exchange, and those parallel fights for freedom.
It's a much richer, more complicated story than you might first think.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us and you listening with a final thought to chew on.
Yeah, consider how these historical entanglements, these threads woven across oceans by empire, still shape who we are today, how they influence cultural identity, connections.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other unexpected shared histories are out there, just below the surface?
Exactly. Maybe this makes you want to track down that documentary or look deeper into some of the things we've discussed. There's always more to uncover.